The U.S. says its forces took out more than a dozen mining Iranian vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, while Iran claims more than 1,300 civilians have been killed in Iran in the U.S.-led military strikes. Oil prices continue to decline on Tuesday, following reports that the International Energy Agency plans to prepare the largest emergency release of oil reserves in its history to ease the supply crisis. Meanwhile, the South Korean government is considering a supplemental budget as one option to tame the oil price hike. President Lee Jae-myung and his Ghanaian counterpart John Mahama held a summit on Wednesday, which included the two countries signing of MOUs on maritime security, technology, and the joint tackling of climate change. We begin with the South Korea-Ghana summit tonight. President Lee Jae-myung today hosted his Ghanaian counterpart John Mahama for talks. Now, strengthening cooperation on trade, critical minerals, and maritime security topped the agenda. Our Yoon Jung-min starts us off.
Bolstering the partnership was the focal point as President Lee Jae-myung hosted his Ghanaian counterpart, John Mahama, noting the two countries' shared experiences of achieving democracy and the increasing trade volume.
서아프리카 3개국과 국경을 맞대고 있는 해양국 가나는 대한민국의 아프리카 시장 진출을 잇는 든든한 교두보이기도 합니다. 그리고 최근에는 매우 큰 규모의 벼 재배 단지를 함께 조성해서 내년부터 한국산 벼 종자를 생산할 예정으로 있습니다.
Ghana, like other African countries, has a potential for critical minerals. And so currently we're exploiting bauxite, manganese, and gold. And we've discovered vast reserves of lithium. Korea has the technology, and we believe that we can explore these minerals together.
Maritime security was also high on the agenda.
가나는 해적 위협이 상존하는 기니만에서 우리 대한민국 국민들의 안전을 지키는데 그동안 적극적으로 협조해 준 참으로 고마운 나라이기도 합니다.
The issue of piracy is of major concern to Korea, just as it is to Ghana. And so I'm happy that one of the memorandums we're going to sign is to do with maritime safety.
MOUs were signed on Wednesday for cooperation not only on maritime security, but also on technology and science, as well as joint tackling of climate change. There was a friendly atmosphere as the leaders touched upon a link between the two countries, represented by Ghana Chocolate, a chocolate bar made from Ghanaian cocoa that was launched in Korea more than 50 years ago. Lee has presented Mahama with the chocolate, who's on a working visit to South Korea. The sentiment was extended to cultural and people-to-people exchanges.
가나 현지에서도 영화, 식품, 화장품 같은 우리 문화가 큰 사랑을 받고 있다고 알고 있습니다.
When I was coming, somebody asked me to bring them back kimchi. And our young people, including my children, listen to K-pop music.
Seoul's top office added that the leaders also addressed regional and global issues, including the Middle East, and said it hoped to expand the nation's diplomatic horizons. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran have entered their 12th day, with Iran fighting back. Now, both sides say they have carried out some of their most intense operations so far, leading to rising damage. Park Eun-ho reports.
Amid continuing attacks in the Middle East, Iran says more than 1,300 civilians have been killed, and nearly 10,000 civilian sites have been hit by the U.S. and Israel since the end of February. This comes as U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth warned Tuesday would be the most intense day of attacks.
Today will be, yet again, our most intense day of strikes inside Iran. The most fighters, the most bombers, the most strikes. Intelligence more refined and better than ever.
According to the New York Times, Iran's new leader Mojtaba Khamenei was also wounded, including an injury to his leg. The report cited multiple Iranian officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity. They say the injury is one of the factors Khamenei hasn't appeared in public since succeeding his father as Iran's supreme leader 3 days ago. Officials say another factor is that any communication with the public could reveal the leader's location. Officials added Khamenei remains alert and is sheltering in a highly secure location with restricted communications. The U.S. military said it destroyed Iranian naval vessels, including 16 mine-laying ships near the Strait of Hormuz, as Tehran threatens to block oil shipments through the strategic waterway. U.S. intelligence sources cited by CNN say Iran has laid several dozen naval mines in the narrow passage in recent days. Iran's military also said it carried out its most intense and heaviest operation since the war began, launching attacks overnight into Wednesday, according to Iranian state media. According to CNN, a suspected Iranian drone struck a U.S. diplomatic facility near Baghdad airport in Iraq on Tuesday. The exact extent of the damage is still being assessed. Gulf countries also said they intercepted new waves of Iranian drones and missiles early Wednesday local time. With both sides continuing to trade attacks, there are no immediate signs of the conflict easing. 박건우, Arirang News.
And international oil prices experienced a dramatic drop on Tuesday local time as optimism grew that the ongoing war in the Middle East could end much sooner than expected. Park Chun-han has this report.
Global oil prices recorded their largest one-day decline since March 22 on Tuesday local time, based on closing prices. Brent crude futures on the Intercontinental Exchange settled at $87.8 per barrel, down 11% from the previous day. WTI crude settled at $83.45 per barrel on the New York Mercantile Exchange, falling nearly 12%. Just a day earlier on Monday, global oil prices had spiked dramatically, with Brent briefly hitting $119 per barrel due to volatility stemming from fears over supply disruptions in the Middle East, particularly through the Strait of Hormuz. The sharp reversal came after U.S. President Donald Trump signaled an early resolution in the conflict in the Middle East. In a CBS interview and subsequent press conference, Trump described the conflict as in its very complete phase and likely to end very soon. He also revealed a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who expressed willingness to help, sparking speculation about an easing of sanctions on Russian oil. Also, expectations rose that G7 nations will release strategic petroleum reserves to combat the high oil prices. The International Energy Agency convened an emergency meeting to assess the situation and consider coordinated releases of strategic oil stockpiles. Canada is reviewing ways to boost its oil output, including delaying maintenance and rerouting exports through the expanded Trans Mountain pipeline to help stabilize global supplies. While markets welcome the signals of de-escalation, experts caution that the situation remains fluid and oil prices could go up or down at any time when variables change. Park Chun-han, Arirang News.
With the current Middle East situation entering its 12th day, hopes are high that the conflict will end as soon as the costs of war and its consequences threaten to mount up. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young is here in the studio to discuss the war's implications not only in the Gulf but in East Asia. Good evening, Soo-young.
Hi, Dami.
So, Soo-young, Trump says the war could end quickly, whereas Iran says it's ready for a prolonged conflict. We're getting mixed signals here, aren't we?
That's right, Tammy. So President Donald Trump said on Monday that, the U.S. is ready to, basically the war could be over very soon, right, saying that, military operations in Iran are far ahead of schedule. Mm-hmm. And Tehran, on the other hand, has indicated that it's very much prepared for a long war. So as you said, mixed signals. Yeah. And analysts say that this rhetoric is in fact very much strategic posturing. Mm.
Sides. So President Trump saying the war could end soon serves both strategic messaging and domestic politics. It signals confidence, reassure allies, and suggests that U.S. military pressure is working. But from Iran's perspective, however, the strategy is opposite. Tehran wants to demonstrate resilience and signal that it can absorb pressure over time.
Of course, talk is cheap, war is not. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the war is costing Washington about $891.4 million per day, with intensive use of advanced missiles, air power and naval assets. So this puts critical military stockpiles under pressure as well, as the US supplies interceptors to Ukraine while maintaining its commitments in the Indo-Pacific. Now, these are just immediate costs, as Tehran strikes neighboring countries in the Gulf and puts pressure on the Strait of Hormuz, squeezing the heart of the world's oil and gas economy. US partners around the world are likely to call for an end to the war. But more crucially for Trump, he needs to consider prices at the pump for US consumers. Average petrol prices have jumped about 11% in the US in a week since the conflict broke out, now standing at around $3.50 per US gallon.
5 days, and there is no possible way that Trump could sustain this kind of warfare until September. That once he had argued, because if he does that, he will gonna definitely lose the election, because midterm election is decided not with the success of diplomatic achievement, but the unemployment and oil prices and all this economic factors. So I don't think the incentives for the United States are there to actually prolong war. And of course, the Iranian side, although they are saying they're going to fight till the end, but they don't have any ammunition. They don't have any asset to fight back.
The concern is the war is expensive. Now, Soo-yeon, but even if the war ends quickly, Iran strikes have already spread across the Gulf. What does that mean for the region?
That's right. Perhaps one of the most consequential impacts of this war is the sheer shock that it's really delivered to Gulf nations. Iran's missile strikes, drone strikes, they've not only just hit US bases in the region, but targeted major ports, hotels, airports and energy facilities, costing civilian lives and casualties in neighboring countries. Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Jordan, Oman and Iraq. The UAE alone has intercepted more than 1,500 missiles and drones, according to its defense ministry. So for countries relying heavily on US security guarantees, this conflict, this experience has really raised some serious questions.
The legacy of this warfare will be massive, in my opinion, because not only they don't trust Iran, but they lost their credibility of United States as well, because United States failed to give a protection to them, because like THAAD, Patriot missile, and all these things.
Then, amid reports that U.S. assets are being redeployed from the Korean Peninsula to the Middle East, what has been the regional reaction, Soo-yeon?
Well, there have been a growing number of commentaries talking about, what you just said, because while U.S. military assets, personnel, they're going to have to be rather stretched across in multiple theatres, across the Gulf, Ukraine, and here in the Indo-Pacific.
Challenge. So if U.S. military resources are increasingly focused on the Middle East, question may arise about force posture and strategic priorities in other regions, including Northeast Asia. So for Seoul, the key task will be balancing its alliances, commitment with the United States, while ensuring that regional deterrence on Korean Peninsula remains credible.
Still, Seoul's presidential office is taking a cautious public stance regarding the matter, warning against speculative reporting. It's emphasizing that the Korea-U.S. alliance remains steadfast, as well as deterrence against North Korea. Meanwhile, questions are being raised in Japan's parliament and media about whether the U.S. will request Tokyo's support in its war effort. Taiwanese media is noting developments in Korea, noting that Taipei hasn't yet been approached by Washington on redeploying US-supplied weapons to support its Middle East operations. Now, this week, Michael DeSombre, US Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, is in Korea for 5 days, starting Wednesday, and will also travel to Tokyo and Ulaanbaatar. So regional security amid this situation in the Middle East, of course, is very much likely to top the agenda, with many watching DeSombre's movements for any signal of U.S. posture.
Indeed. Soo-yeon, thank you so much for keeping us updated. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Tammy.
South Korea has upgraded its economic response to an emergency status to shield against the fallout from the Middle East. To combat high domestic fuel prices, the government is preparing price ceilings, extended subsidies, and potential supplementary budget. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
South Korea is aggressively deploying all available policy tools to shield its economy from the escalating situation in the Middle East.
To minimize the impact of the Middle East situation on livelihoods, the economy, and industry, we will push for sufficient support by utilizing all possible policy tools, including a supplementary budget.
This came on Wednesday as the government, recognizing that domestic pumps often lag behind global price drops, upgraded its regular economic meetings to an emergency status and elevated its Joint Response Task Force to the vice ministerial level. Global energy markets have been rocked by extreme volatility, with the impact lingering nationwide. The national average price of gasoline has surged past 1905 won per liter, with prices in Seoul nearing 1950 won. The Seoul average even surpassed 2,000 won at one point. While recent international oil trends have shown signs of cooling over hopes of an end to Operation Epic Fury, the government remains on high alert, closely monitoring price trajectories. This includes a maximum price ceiling on petroleum products being implemented this week. Furthermore, public notices prohibiting the hoarding or withholding of sales of petroleum products by refineries and gas stations will be enacted to guarantee stable supply. For the logistics sector, the Land Ministry's diesel subsidy program for freight trucks, buses, and taxis is being expanded. Extended through April, the government will now cover 70% of the cost when diesel exceeds 1,700 won per liter, up from 50%. Applied retroactively from March 1st, drivers of 25-ton freight trucks can expect up to 440,000 won in monthly savings. While the efforts are being made, the Deputy Prime Minister said this is just preemptive measure and the nation at the moment is in good hands.
Although external uncertainties are high, our economy's fundamentals in key industries like semiconductors are solid, and we possess crisis response capabilities, including 208 days' worth of petroleum reserves.
For industries highly dependent on the Middle East, such as naphtha importers, the government will provide financial backing to secure alternative supply chains. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
North Korea claims it conducted another strategic cruise missile launch from a naval warship, with leader Kim Jong-un and his daughter Joo-ae present at the event. Ian-jin has this report.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has once again observed the test firing of strategic cruise missiles from the Chaehyun, a 5,000-ton multi-purpose destroyer. The launches came as Seoul and Washington kicked off their annual joint military exercise Freedom Shield on Monday, which the North has long denounced despite them being defensive in nature. According to a report from the North state media, the Korean Central News Agency, on Wednesday, the tests took place on Tuesday and were observed by Kim Jong-un via video. The KCNA said multiple cruise missiles were launched in quick succession along flight trajectories set over the Yellow Sea and flew for just under 3 hours before striking designated targets. Kim expressed satisfaction that the tests verified the reliability of the National Integrated Control System for Strategic Weapons and the superiority of the destroyer's integrated combat system. But Kim raised the need to test the efficiency of the automatic guns installed on the warship and presented tasks for strengthening the regime's naval power, adding that it is more advantageous to enhance capabilities by equipping high-speed warships of less than 3,000 tons with guns and to install supersonic weapon systems instead of guns on the 5,000 and 8,000-ton destroyers. Similar strategic cruise missile launches were conducted earlier this month, ahead of the Chaehyun's commissioning, which Kim had observed from the site alone. What is notable about the launches on Tuesday is that, based on the photos released, Kim's daughter Joo-ae was also seen overseeing the launch. This continues recent elevated public images of Kim Joo-ae, including the latest display of photos on a billboard at the North Korean embassy in Beijing's Chaoyang district. While this board is a space that showcases North Korea's official public image in China, photos are known to have been updated irregularly, about 3 to 4 times a year. However, following the change of the photos in February, which were centered on former leader Kim Jong-il ahead of his date of birth, known as the Day of the Shining Star in the North, the photos were changed out again in March to include ones featuring Kim Joo-ae. 이은진, Arirang News.
Now, at the 2026 Winter Paralympics over in Italy, Team Korea is exceeding expectations, having already garnered a full set of gold, silver, and bronze medals. Our Jung Hae-rim has the highlights.
South Korea has now secured a full set of gold, silver, and bronze medals at the Milano-Cortina Winter Paralympics, surpassing its initial medal target of 1 gold and 1 silver. A major contributor to that success is 19-year-old cross-country skier Kim Yoon-ji. Kim captured silver in the women's sitting sprint final with a time of 3 minutes and 10 seconds, finishing just behind American Oksana Masters. The medal marks Kim's second of the games. Earlier this week, she made history by winning gold in the women's biathlon, becoming the first Korean woman to win a gold medal at the Winter Paralympics. Kim competes as a dual-season athlete, swimming in the summer and skiing in the winter. And despite her young age, she has quickly emerged as one of South Korea's most promising Paralympic athletes. The 19-year-old still has 3 events remaining at the Games, raising hopes she could add more medals before the competition concludes. There was also success in the curling rink. The world #1 wheelchair curling mixed doubles duo Baek Hye-jin and Lee Yong-seok defeated the United States 6-3 in the semifinals. The team secured an early lead and never allowed a comeback, guaranteeing at least a silver medal. This milestone marks South Korea's first Paralympic medal in wheelchair curling in 16 years, dating back to the 2010 Vancouver Games. The duo will face a powerhouse team from China for the gold medal later on Wednesday. Meanwhile, the 4-person mixed curling team also remains in strong contention, currently sitting in 3rd place in the preliminaries after a dominant 9-0 victory over Norway. With several events still ahead, South Korea's athletes are continuing to build momentum at the Paralympic Games. Jung Hae-rim, Arirang News.
Over the weekend, the world observed International Women's Day, celebrating the progress made while reflecting on key challenges that still lie ahead in terms of advancing gender equality. At the UN Women's Center in Seoul held a ceremony to commemorate the day on Wednesday to invite experts to delve into the discourse. Our Kim Bo-kyung was at the venue.
Though Korean society has seen significant progress in gender equality, there is still a gap that cannot be narrowed enough. Not just in lower representation in economic activities and leadership, but also in terms of a digital society and crime.
As AI becomes part of everyday life, we must address problems like deepfakes used for digital sex crimes and gender-based violence in relationships. Gender equality is a value for everyone, and it is key to making our society more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable.
Commemorating this year's International Women's Day, the UN Women Knowledge and Partnership Center in Seoul held a ceremony, inviting pundits who have witnessed ongoing gender inequalities and are trying to overcome them. Among the speakers was a math professor who emphasized that AI learns from already unfair data, causing itself to learn discrimination against women.
If different perspectives are missing when technology is designed, it can create bias. When this technology is used in hiring, healthcare, or the justice system, it can make discrimination part of the system. Women's participation in science and technology is not just about numbers. It is about fairness.
Gender equality is not just a women's matter, in that gender equality lets men go beyond the traditional idea of being manly, come out of the so-called man box. The progress in equality allows men to be freed.
I believe that when men accept and take part in gender equality, it can also help solve men's problems and bring them greater freedom. For men who want to move away from the patriarchy but feel confused within a strong patriarchal system, gender equality can offer a real solution and a new model of masculinity.
Gender bias and discrimination still exist across many areas of society, often unconsciously. By encouraging open discussion on these issues, South Korea aims to move toward a more gender-equal society, not only for women, but for everyone. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Most regions have been trapped by that unwelcome spring gust. Dusty air for several days now, but the dust should begin to clear late tomorrow afternoon as cleaner northeasterly winds will move in, starting from the eastern regions. Then also starting tomorrow afternoon, rain is expected in some parts of southern regions and the east coast. And the east of Gangwon-do province might get snow instead, with up to 15 centimeters expected through Friday. And temperature gaps between morning and afternoon stay wide, with Seoul beginning the day at just 1 degree Celsius, but cloudier in southern regions at 5 degrees Celsius in Busan. Then by the afternoon, Seoul, Gwangju, Busan will be all getting up to 13 degrees Celsius. Now, the capital area will stay under mostly to partly sunny skies, while big gaps in readings will continue. With that in mind, here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
저는 만 5살에 바이올린을 시작했는데요. 바이올린 소리를 워낙 좋아했어서 그 특유의 따뜻함과 약간 사람의 목소리 같은 목소리를 갖고 있거든요, 바이올린이. 저는 무대에 올랐을 때보다는 이제 혼자 연습할 때 더 큰 희열을 느끼는데, 제가 표현하고자 하는 음악이 잘 나왔을 때 그때 가장 큰 기쁨을 느끼는 것 같아요. 그래서 저만의 색깔을 어떻게 하면 찾아갈 수 있을까, 그걸 제일 많이 고민하는 것 같아요. 아무래도 연습을 할 때는 이제 생각과 고민을 많이 하는 반면에 무대에서 연주할 때는 정말 머릿속을 비우고 아무 생각도 안 하려고 하는 것 같아요. 무대에서는 자유롭게, 콩쿨 무대도 저만의 독주라고 생각하는 자세를 가지려고 하고 있어요. 사실 바이올린과는 거의 제 인생의 대부분을 같이 해왔기 때문에 저를 힘들게 할 때도 많지만 제가 가장 사랑하고 아끼는 존재입니다. 작곡가가 전달하고 싶은 메시지와 또 제 자신이 관객들에게 전달하고 싶은 메시지를 모두 다 설득력 있게 잘 전달할 수 있는 그런 연주자가 되고 싶습니다.
held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the status UN summit. A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang. Knock knock. The magical door to the world of K-animation is swinging wide open. Meet your instant new BFF, the adorable Catch. Tina Ping will have you hooked from the very first glance. Need a hand? Our Robocar Poli Rescue team is always zooming in to save the day. How about tagging along on Ping Fong and Pal's super exciting quest to reclaim their lost magic? With the mysterious life forms Cabion by your side, you can become a Cabion master and save humanity like the total hero. Protecting children's innocence while igniting their boundless imaginations. That's the magic of Korean animation. K-animation, the ultimate bestie for kids worldwide.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyun. The United States and South Korea have begun their annual joint military exercises, but tensions with North Korea are already rising. After issuing a sharp warning through Kim Yo-jong, Pyongyang followed up with another signal as leader Kim Jong-un personally observed the test launch of a strategic cruise missile that appeared to strike an actual target. The move is drawing attention as a possible show of force timed with the joint drills. At the same time, broader security factors are also in play, from Washington's global military commitments to shifting diplomatic signals into the region. So what message is North Korea trying to send, and what could come next on the Korean Peninsula? For answers to this, we are joined here in the studio by Ko Myung-hyun, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy. A big welcome, Dr. Go.
It's very nice to be here.
And also joining us online is Joel Atkinson, Professor of Graduate School of International and Area Studies at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Good to see you, Professor.
Yes, hello. It's nice to be with you.
So let's first just start a discussion with North Korea's response to the drills, Dr. Go. After Kim Yo-jong's criticism, Kim Jong-un observed the launch of the Hwasal cruise missile, which appears to have struck a real target. How serious would you read into this situation, and what kind of message do you think North Korea is sending?
Well, it's not an increase in the threat level by an order of magnitude. Not at all. It's just another tactical weapons development by North Korea. We have known North Korea having developed this cruise missile capability for a while. What's interesting here is that first of all, it was launched from a new missile-guided destroyer, Chaehyun. And so this is a capability that North Korea didn't have before. But in terms of tactical threat, I wouldn't say it's very high, because it's really to track a big vessel like a missile destroyer like Chaehyun. So launching a cruise missile from a vessel like that, it doesn't really carry an element of surprise. Whereas when it comes to the strategic messaging that North Korea might have intended with this test, it's very clear. This missile, Hwasal cruise missile, is nuclear capable. So clearly, North Korea is trying to send another message that any kind of escalation in the Korean Peninsula, any kind of contingency in the Korean Peninsula, might easily escalate into a nuclear exchange. So this is also another moment for North Korea to showcase its nuclear capability.
Right, so another way of really showcasing its nuclear force. Now, when we go back a little bit to the joint military drills itself, around 18,000 troops are taking part, similar to last year, but field exercises have been cut to 22, which is less than half of last year's level. Professor Atkinson, why do you think was the scale reduced? And also, where does the wartime OPCON transfer process stand right now?
Yeah, well, at least according to what has been reported, the reason is that the Korean government, the Lee Jae-myung administration, wanted to reduce the scale of the exercise as part of that ongoing attempt to kind of induce North Korea, encourage North Korea into a dialogue, a productive, cooperative dialogue. For a long time, North Korea has criticized these big joint US-Korea exercises as war preparations, as preparation for an invasion. So presumably, the Lee administration believes that if it reduces the size of this round of Freedom Shield exercises, if more of the exercise is done through simulations rather than troops in the field, if training is spread out across more smaller exercises rather than a few really big ones, Pyongyang will take that as a concession and thus warm up to Seoul, that it will agree to start talking. Apparently the Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise last August was also reduced in size, perhaps at least in part for that same reason. Again, according to the reports, the American side pushed back a little bit on this. Ostensibly, it was because they had already committed the forces and resources to doing the exercise. The real reason is probably because it reduces readiness and signals a lack of resolve. But I'm guessing probably Washington didn't push too hard, as there are those in the Trump administration who are happy to see less money spent on US forces Korea or focused on North Korea as opposed to other priorities such as China or the Western Hemisphere or indeed, the action in Iran. And there are those who, like the Lee administration, want to encourage Kim Jong-un back to negotiating with US President Trump, probably including Trump himself. So you mentioned the transfer of wartime operational control. The Lee administration is very, I think, confidently asserting that everything is on track. These exercises are part of that, what they call the conditions-based process to gain wartime operational control. But clearly Seoul believes it can reduce the scale of these exercises while still moving ahead with what's a very quick timeline, aiming to attain operational control in 2028, perhaps, before the end of Trump's term. It's difficult to know what the American side thinks about this, as the Trump administration is, not a fully coherent policy-making entity with consistent messaging and decision-making. And there's also Congress to consider. But I suspect behind closed doors, the two sides are probably not completely on the same page on this schedule.
So definitely there seems to be a lot of uncertainty. And another factor that's adding to it is the war in the Middle East, of course. There's even talk that some U.S. forces Korea equipment could be redeployed. So, Professor, if that actually happens, what could it mean for the security on the Korean Peninsula?
Yes, apparently the U.S. is in the process of moving some equipment out of its bases here and sending them to the Middle East. There is precedent for that. It happened on a much larger scale during the war in Iraq. And then in May last year, a U.S. forces Korea Patriot missile defense unit with about 500 personnel was moved to the Middle East ahead of that strike against Iran's nuclear facilities in June. This time it's reportedly Patriot launchers and offensive artillery and even THAAD interceptor missiles. That THAAD aspect has received most of the attention due to the anger and the economic punishment Korea received from China when the US introduced THAAD in 2016. Much of that attention is actually misplaced, as it was THAAD's radar that upset Beijing so much. And at least based on what's been reported so far, that radar remains, and it probably will remain, along with the launches and at least some of the missiles that they have left. So how could such a move affect the security on the Korean Peninsula? These are real capabilities, which is why the US wants them in the Middle East. But what those missile defense assets could stop, I would say is only a small fraction of what North Korea can use to attack. And more importantly, US forces Korea is only one component of deterrence against North Korea. The bulk of deterrence comes from South Korean capabilities and from what the US can bring from outside of the peninsula. So this movement is not going to have a large impact on security in a material sense. So basically, President Lee is not really wrong when he says that it won't affect security, but it does relate to broader developments that will affect Korean security. That could be the U.S. moving away from deterring North Korea as it focuses on other priorities, and it could also be increasing pressure on South Korea from China as China increasingly focuses on American forces here as a kind of a deployable force that could play a role in the defense of Taiwan, for example. But in of themselves, these redeployments don't really give us, I think, any new information about where all of that is heading.
So it's kind of a relieving to hear that the redeployment of that is not really a big, going to give a big loophole to the current situation. But meanwhile, for South Korea, Dr. Go, reportedly South Korea provided Cheongung-2 interceptor missiles to the UAE. Do you think this could show some kind of strength of Korea's defense industry or raise concerns about our own defense readiness?
Well, first of all, it was a debut for the Cheongung system in actual battle. So it's been reported that Cheongung has been able to intercept more than 90% of the targets, so which is very good, obviously. But also showcases the strength of the South Korea's defense industry because it provides an alternative source of a highly sophisticated anti-missile defense system that's actually available in the world, of which there are very few. So in that sense, I think I really probably adds to strengthens the deterrence aspect for allies and partners around the world, which sorely need this kind of anti-missile defense systems when they're essentially like running out right now. But having said that, I think there should be, I think the latter part of your question is very much on the mark in the sense that selling a weapon system to an ally or partner, it's actually more than just selling on a product. It's not like selling a Hyundai car, for instance, to a customer. The defense system essentially carries a political meaning as well as a guarantee that if there's any contingency that involves a customer, in this case a military customer, the South Korea will have to stand by and abide and also support the customer base for the duration of the contingency. And that could, in a worst case scenario, involve South Korea in a contingency or military conflict that it doesn't want. So clearly, Iran is an example of such a scenario. So for now, I think the UAE, which actually uses this Cheongung defense system, is using it for its own self-defense. But if it's been reported that UAE might in fact retaliate against Iran for its attacks, then South Korea might be asked by UAE to step up even more, which in that case could potentially entrap South Korea into an unwanted conflict with Iran. So, but it is a natural part of the defense contract. So something that I think South Korea's defense industry as well as the South Korean government should take into consideration in the future contracts and export agreements.
So it really carries a strategic political significance to it as well. Now, when we stay with a broader message coming out from Washington, President Trump said that when, quote, crazy people have nuclear weapons, bad things can happen. And the U.S. Defense Secretary said strong action on Iran would send a message to others. So, Professor Atkinson, do you think North Korea could also see that as a warning?
Well, one major reason, perhaps the most important reason that North Korea could get to the stage that it has with nuclear weapons is it because it had a very formidable, a very strong conventional non-nuclear deterrent, basically enough artillery to flatten Seoul. Iran had a conventional deterrent, that was Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen. But those were all degraded after Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, 2023. That greatly reduced the cost for Israel and the US to go after Iran's nuclear facilities and indeed to even go after a government that would not meet their demands on nuclear weapons and try to replace them with a different government that would. And that's kind of what we're seeing. So North Korea is in a different league. It still has those formidable conventional capabilities, and it now also has nuclear weapons. It also has much stronger support from China. Unlike with Iran, the US must assume that China could intervene to defend North Korea like it did during the Korean War. So it's possible that Washington sees this as a message, negotiate away your nuclear weapons or else. But it'd be pretty dumb of them to think that it would work. But I would argue it does send a message to Pyongyang. It shows that Trump is willing to use force. He's willing to do things kind of outside the norm. So I would think Pyongyang may therefore be even more cautious about using pressure tactics, including low-level violence against Washington. They're going to be much more, they'll be a degree more cautious about that kind of approach.
Mm-hmm. So having heard that and the latest developments coming out from the world, Dr. Gov't, do you think Kim Jong-un would try to reopen dialogue with U.S. President Donald Trump within this year, or do you think he would be waiting for some kind of incentives from Washington?
Well, clearly, I think engaging in dialogue with Washington at this juncture is a double-edged sword for Kim Jong-un. I think one of the biggest challenges for Kim Jong-un is assurance or lack of thereof coming from Trump. So as Professor Atkinson described so well, this is an element of a perception that President Trump is opportunistic and sometimes engages in this kind of surprise actions that goes beyond the norms of behavior by a superpower like the United States, such as engaging in decapitation operations against leaders of other countries. So I think this carries an element of risk for North Korea. So for instance, if Kim Jong-un and Trump agreed to sit down in the same room, and if, to the surprise of the North Koreans, if President Trump puts on the table a demand for denuclearization, such a demand is going to carry more weight than before because unlike previous American presidents, President Trump might in fact react in a way that surprises North Korea in a bad way if such a demand is not accepted or considered carefully by Kim Jong-un. So I think that in fact introduces another element or burden for Kim Jong-un when it comes to engaging in dialogue with Trump, because any kind of negotiation carries a potential or downside of punishment by the United States now. And I think even though the chance of such a punishment taking place is pretty low, given the fact that North Korea possesses a very high level of deterrence, including nuclear weapons, nonetheless, there's still such a little bit of a risk for North Korea. And North Koreans, despite our perception that North Koreans are very irrational, in fact, they are very rational and they are highly risk averse, especially when it comes to protection of their leader. So in that sense, I think the North Koreans will be even more cautious in engaging North Korea after what happened in Venezuela and as well as what's happening in Iran.
Mm-hmm. So unpredictability would lessen the chances. Now, meanwhile, we're also seeing active diplomacy on the ground. Senior U.S. State Department officials are visiting South Korea this week, including Assistant Secretary David Wiesel and Michael Desombre. Professor, what messages do these kinds of visits to Korea actually send, and what issues do you think would be on the table?
Yeah, so it does seem relevant that David Wiesel, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Northeast Asia, was in Seoul, I think, until today. And then Michael Desombre, the Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia, he arrived today for a 5-day visit. But at the same time, I think essentially it is their job to come for visits. I don't think it has to mean that there's something kind of extraordinary going on that they need to talk about. But, then again, having said that, what isn't extraordinary these days, there's certainly no shortage of things for them to discuss with their counterparts in Seoul. There's the issue of the trade and investment deal, implementing the deal signed last year. That could include all kinds of things, new issues like the value of the Korean won, the exchange rate. There's Iran and what the US side expects from Seoul in terms of messaging and support. there's that issue of encouraging North Korea to talk, and with some speculating Trump could even meet Kim Jong-un in Beijing when he visits at the end of the month. There's that issue of modernizing the alliance that relates to burden sharing, but also to what extent it should be oriented toward deterring China, not just North Korea. That recent US-China fighter jet encounter over the West Sea, that's really put that in the spotlight. There's much to discuss there. And then finally, there's this kind of entanglement, I guess you could call it, of South Korean and US domestic politics. I saw that while he met with a prominent opposition figure, Lee Jun-suk, who's quite, pro-American. And, the US may even raise, concerns about the imprisonment of former President Yoon Suk-yeol. Who knows, something that's kind of coming through their MAGA network. So, yeah, I think we'll just really have to wait and see what information comes out about their discussions.
So we'll really have to see about the results. Now, finally, before we conclude our discussion tonight, Dr. Go, North Korea will hold its Supreme People's Assembly on the 15th. What signals should we watch for in that event?
Well, I think the grand issues when it comes to the next 5 years of North Korea's regime's policy has been settled in the previous meetings of the Ninth Party Congress. I think some of the loose ends that's been left over from the previous meeting could be resolved, such as, it's actually our inquiries about what's the real position that Kim Yo-jong will be put in charge with, for instance, and as well as potential changes in the conformation of the leadership changes in North Korea, whether this generational leadership change that we have witnessed in the past months is in fact a generational change or some sort of a signaling of a new emergence of a new political class. So I think it's going to be not very surprising, but nonetheless, it's an important event for North Korea. So it bears watching.
So we will be watching for more signals on North Korea's direction over there. We'll have to conclude our discussion here tonight. Thank you so much for your insights, Dr. Go.
My pleasure.
And of course, Professor Atkinson, too. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And nice to see you there, Dr. Go.
Likewise, good to see you.
Okay.
And that will be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.
How to survive in Korea. Barbecue restaurants. Step 1. Taking care of your clothes. Put your